right, so this is the woods. Look, this is the woods. This is part of America. This is where the woodsmen live. This is where they make moonshine back in the day. This is where big battles of the Civil War were fought. This is where the Revolutionary War was fought. Hillary lost the woods. She lost North Carolina. She lost Wisconsin. She's never been to a woods. She's been in Massapequa or Chappaqua. You know, they got golf courses. That's not a Into the light. Into the light I see now. It's all plain to me. It's the Keiser report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacey Herbert. Stacey, what's going on?
Max, yes, we are in North Carolina, of course. But I want to say, you know, over the last few weeks, I've been observing that it is total political chaos. And I was thinking, you know, it's quite nice to be in the financial news business instead of the political news business, because how on earth do you keep on top of Donald Trump's tweets? And I noticed that Janet Yellen also said something similar. The Fed is saying, well, we might need to raise interest rates. And in the past, they've always said they're never going to look at markets. They never respond to financial markets. But now they're worried that there's so much lack of volatility, that there's so little drama in the stock markets. It's so calm, continuing up, 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 no volatility. And they think, well, they're concerned about this.
But before there was fake news, there was the Federal Reserve Bank, and now there's Janet Yellen. Of course, markets respond to what they do in the Fed. Of course, the Fed influences what they do in the stock market. It's for her not to believe that, understand that, and say something about that. It shows that she's either deaf, a moronic, or on drugs, or all three. She is keeping interest rates artificially low to keep the zombie economy going. She's giving a blood transfusion with free money to a dead patient called asset inflation and no economy, no jobs, automation. She should be more cognizant of what's happening. She's like Hillary. She hangs out in Chappaqua. She's playing golf probably on some artificial astroturf. She has no expectation or understanding of what actually is happening in the real world.
However, my point is that there is so much up and down, up and down. Donald Trump is presidential. No, he's a thug. No, he's crazy today. Oh no, he just blew up the world with a tweet. Oh my God, like it's nonstop drama. It's like day trading against the president is out of control. Whereas if you listen to analysts or like normal financial people or Jamie Dimon or Lloyd Blankfein, it's all dull in the financial markets compared to what Donald Trump offers.
Well, it's not dull if you look at Trump's tweets, but the underlying current is less regulation, a lot of money going into energy companies, a lot of money going into banks, because they feel like we're going to go back to an era where there was no such thing as the progressive movement in America, where you're just going to have corporations running amok, doing anything they want to do to the environment, no regulations in the banking sector, and this is just attracting a lot of capital, and markets are going higher. I don't understand why they say there's no volatility. I mean, markets keep marching higher. How is that no volatility? They're going higher. The VIX index, the volatility index, is quiet, but that's not a true test of volatility in the market. If you have that as well as other indices being manipulated, then no, you don't have that as a proxy for any volatility. But you're saying that Trump is a volatile character.
No, well, markets, they'll tend to be, this is volatilely up, but it's not really. It's just, it's soaring up. To be volatile, it would do this, up, down, up, down, up, down. And it's not having any down moves. It's not having the down moves that they expect to see, especially, I assume, you know, any human being is going to be a political creature. So Janet Yellen and all the Fed presidents have to know or have to have heard about all these tweets coming from the president of the United States. They must know that there's a madman in charge, and assuming that the markets are going to crash or do something or respond to some crazy tweet. So what do you think of that?
Well, the fact is that you've got Donald Trump doesn't trade on the stock exchange. If there was a security called Trump on the stock exchange, maybe some of his subsidiaries or his casino operations, you know, he was listed for a time and then he was delisted under a bankruptcy under his current Commerce Secretary, Wilbur Ross, I believe his name is, bailed him out. That's how he got the job as Commerce Secretary. But he himself does not trade on the exchange. Twitter does trade on the exchange, but you know, that's been mordant, not really much happening on that stock. I've been telling people if they want to shut up Trump, buy Twitter outright. Mark Cuban, if you want to shut Twitter, you want to shut Trump down, just buy Twitter stock for $25, $30 billion and delist Trump from Twitter. Put your money where your mouth is, or shut up.
Well, actually, before I move on to my first headline, which is actually a tweet from myself, I do want to say I learned something quite interesting, is that Steve Mnuchin, you know, the former Goldman Sachs guy, former One West or Bank West, whatever that bank and that defrauded all those poor mortgage holders in California, well, he lives in Trump Tower in Washington, D.C. I thought that was really interesting, or Trump Hotel. But the other big story that's been going on is, you know, Bill Gates mentioned that we should tax robots, and this has triggered quite a, you know, frenzy of whether or not we should tax robots, and it made me think of, you know, a lot of commentators and financial analysis is saying that, well, workers just have to get used to it. Robots and machines and algorithms are going to replace them. They can't be Luddites. They can't hang on to the past. They need to move forward because this is more efficient. A machine is more efficient. And I tweeted, Medicare for all. Workers have to accept being replaced by robots, so why shouldn't insurance execs accept being replaced by something more efficient? Because this is in light of the Republicans wanting to repeal and replace or repeal, you know, Obamacare. The problem they're encountering is the AARP and all those people between 50 and 64 who are subject to the, you know, they're not on free Medicare for all, i.e. government-run insurance, health insurance. They have to be exposed to the whims of the market, and no insurance executive, no insurance company wants to cover these 50 to 64-year-olds because that's where most of your medical costs come in the private insurance sector.
Well, this is where Britain is way ahead of the game. There was a story recently about a man in Britain having sex with a letterbox.
Yes.
And this
a mailbox is what they call it here in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, this is on top of the news from a few weeks ago of man having sex in Britain with a drain pipe or a drain hole in the ground. So this is man and machine are now having, you know, copulating, they're having sex. That'll give birth to some kind of chimera, half man, half machine. And of course, those new chimera, half man, half machines will have their own sexuality, and then they'll probably have their own transgender sexuality. So we need to actually have new bathrooms. We need bathrooms for transgender chimera, half robot, half humans.
No, they already have trans species. They're called trans species. There are people who feel they are not earthlings and they're not humans, that they feel like they're aliens or an alien form of life to what we here assume we are all made of.
When the humans become extinct, and that's happening pretty soon because of environmental Armageddon, what will be left? Not the pyramids like the Egyptians or the great temples of yore. No, what will be left from this civilization will be an endless column of bathrooms from here into infinity. Everyone gets their own bathroom, and that'll be the legacy of humans on planet Earth.
Well, then I would go long toilets. But in the meantime, I want to turn to another headline here. This is also from England, it's from the Bank of England. And they say economists may be underestimating how fast the robots are coming. Economists may be underestimating the impact on labor markets of increasing automation and the rise of artificial intelligence, according to a post published on the Bank of England's staff blog on Wednesday. So they're saying that the potential for simultaneous and rapid disruption, coupled with the breadth of human functions that AI might replicate, may have profound implications for labor markets, and they're warning that basically governments aren't preparing for it because, you know, one of the arguments is like, we've already gone through this in the Industrial Revolution, and the people became better off. They became middle class, they became more educated, they got better houses, they ate better, and all sorts of stuff like this. But they're saying, well, yeah, that happened over 150 years, though, and this is going to, we're telling you right now, today, everybody has a normal job, a relatively normal job. But in 10 years' time, 15 years' time, it's all going to be changing.
No, the machines are definitely here. The event horizon has come. And the Industrial Revolution was a linear progress, you know, certain large increases in energy, you know, output for energy input because of the steam engine. And, you know, but here you've got machines are breeding with other machines. You know, the software is breeding with itself at an ever faster rate. So it's evolving at quite a bit faster than humans can possibly ever evolve. First of all, humans don't admit they are currently still evolving due to the psychosis enabled by Christian fundamentalism. They don't believe anything actually that pertains to our condition as humans, but they therefore would be completely out of the loop when it comes to understanding the evolution of machines. And I've always said, as you know, for many years, that humans will basically become extinct, but giving birth to their avatars, just like the God of our existence died giving birth to us in the cosmic sense. We will die giving birth to our cyber avatars who will question where they came from. It'll be us, of course, but we'll be long gone.
So speaking of this disruption, a lot of people think, oh, it's all those working class sort of horrible people that voted for Trump. These are the people that we shouldn't care about anyway. This is a new actual idea in the political sphere here, in the Democratic sphere. People think we shouldn't care about these people in the Rust Belt. But here's a headline. JP Morgan software does in seconds what took lawyers 360,000 hours. The program, called COIN for Contract Intelligence, does the mind-numbing job of interpreting commercial loan agreements that, until the project went online in June, consumed 360,000 hours of work each year by lawyers and loan officers. The software reviews documents in seconds, is less error-prone, and never asks for vacation. Of course, this is, if you factor that 360,000 hours times $500 an hour for these corporate lawyers, you're saving $180 million. That's deflationary. That's a lot of white-collar jobs out of work.
Well, you know, some of these corporations are claiming that machines have rights. So if machines have rights and their semi-cognitive abilities are exercised in the marketplace, that means that they can also hire lawyers. So you're going to have machines hiring lawyers who are going to chew through hundreds of thousands of hours worth of legal for a fraction of the cost to sue other machines, so that at the end of the day, where's the humans in all this? Nowhere! But we'll still be here after the break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to turn to Wolf Richter of wolfstreet.com. Wolf, welcome back.
Hi, Max. Thank you for having me on your show.
All right. Now, Wolf, this is really something here. The Dow Jones continues to hit new all-time highs after the new all-time high, but you write that this is worse than before the last three crashes. And by the last three crashes, I believe you're referring to the 87 crash, the 2008 crash, and maybe another crash. But how can this possibly be? I mean, we're in a permanent state of exalted prices. The Fed will never go and raise rates ever again. We've hit a permanent new plateau, Wolf. What are you talking about? Are you a heretic?
Yeah, maybe I am. When you look at the 30 companies in the Dow, for example, and you look at the revenues, you realize that in 2016, the aggregate revenue, so the combined revenues of the 30 Dow companies at $2.7 trillion was exactly where it was in 2011. So, there has been no revenue growth in the Dow companies in those 6 years. If you look at the S&P 500 earnings, you get a similar picture. We've had 6 quarters of earnings declines in a row, and then we had 2 quarters now in the last half of 2016 of minor earnings increases. So these earnings increases brought earnings back to, in 2016, to where they'd been in 2011. So now the companies that make up the S&P 500, the aggregate earnings are back where they've been in 2011. And during that time, the stock prices, the S&P 500 index itself has surged 87%. So what's happening here is that earnings aren't increasing, but stock prices are soaring. And so, in other words, the multiples, the PE ratio, is soaring. And it went from 14.9 in 2012 to 26.7 right now. And yeah, it nearly doubled. So in other words, for the same amount of earnings, you have a stock price that's nearly twice as high. That's the big difference. We have seen periods of these kind of multiple expansions before, and multiple expansions are when PE ratios go up. They happen in cycles, and they're followed by multiple compression. And multiple compression is a big, scary thing because that's associated with crashes. That's associated with sell-offs. But they always follow one another. So you have a period of multiple expansion, and then the multiples go back down. So we've had three large periods before this one of multiple expansions. And that was before the crash, as you said, in 1987, before the crash in 2000, and before the crash in 2008, 2009. And the largest period, the longest period, was the one before the crash in 2000, where multiples expanded for 40 months in a row. Now we're now 57 months into the multiple expansion in the current cycle. So this is far higher than the prior record, and all prior records have led to crashes. So when we look at the data, we see that the market should have turned south a long time ago, but it hasn't. And so we wonder why hasn't it, and obviously now we're in a different world. We have monetary policies around the world that include negative interest rates and big bouts of QE. More recently, we've had the stock markets expecting miracles from the Trump administration. So there's all kinds of things that fall into this, but we know from the data that multiple expansion, as we've seen, won't last forever. We know that. It goes in cycles, and it will eventually compress, and we just don't know when.
Now, there's been a tremendous amount of activity in the private equity market. These are companies that are not listed. Let's take Uber, for example, that raised money at something like a $70 billion market capitalization, which is very, very high. And it's not listed, so you don't have that contributing to the numbers and the aggregates that you are just talking about. But a lot of these privately listed companies like an Uber or an Airbnb, other of the private equity companies, their multiples are astronomically high, like 60, 70, 80, or their multiples are to infinity because they're not showing any profits whatsoever. They have infinity multiples. If these companies were actually listed on the exchange, would it be more like we saw in the dot-com era of 2000, 2001, where on the NASDAQ, which is predominated by high-tech companies, you did see an average PE get to close to 40 or 45 times, which was an historic high. So my question is, have you put those numbers back into it? Is it a factor? What are your thoughts?
Well, we just saw Snap go public, and Snap's a money-losing company like most of the ones you mentioned. So it went public, and the next day it surged to a market valuation of $30 billion. Which is, given the fact that it earns, last year it didn't earn any money, lost a whole bunch of money, but it made like 400 million in advertising revenues. And so you put a valuation of 30 billion on it, you realize that companies like this may never earn any money. And so the multiple for them will be infinity. And if Snap is not included in the S&P 500, it may be included if the valuation keeps going up, even though today it's taking a pretty big hit.
So a company like Amazon, which is now approaching a $400 billion market cap. For many years, the company did not really report earnings or underreported earnings because Jeff Bezos would say, I don't like paying taxes. I think it's a waste of money to pay taxes. I'd rather disappoint Wall Street and not come in with the earnings and redeploy that capital elsewhere in building the company. And then, of course, he became Amazon, So there is some logic to it and some history to it. So Snap would look at a company like that and say, look, we don't want to report earnings. We don't want to pay taxes. It's a waste of money. We want to grab market share, become a dominant player, monopolize the market, and build a huge, barriers to entry. And then someday down the road, we'll start reporting earnings. By then, though, we'll be the dominant player. So isn't there some business logic to it, Wolf?
There certainly is for Amazon and some other companies. In terms of Snap, they have an app that has a lot of competition from Facebook and Apple and all kinds of other big companies. So Amazon revolutionized the business model. And that happened to other companies successfully too. I mean, they came up with something on a large scale. They were the first major mover in that, and they threw everything at it, and they made it work for them. Amazon could earn more money if it raised its prices a little bit. It would cause a little bit of a problem in sales, but they could cut back on their free shipping and so forth. They could tweak the system to make lots of money at this point if they wanted to, but they're going for market share. So they get lots of very cheap funding from Wall Street. So they don't really have any reason to change their setup to where they make more money. Their stock price is sky high, so there's no pressure on Amazon to do anything about profits. And that's true for some other companies too that that are not sitting in the same sweet spot that Amazon's sitting in.
Let's leave the micro of looking at individual companies and let's look at more macro. The crashes that we've talked about, as you've alluded to in the previous cycles, there were events that took place that ended up with a contraction in these multiples and interest rates started to go up and this type of thing. At the moment, however, even though there's talk of interest rates going up, there's enormous pressures in the markets to keep interest rates cheap. For example, you got two major factors. One would be, it looks like Venezuela is about to go belly up. It's about to become a collapsed state. And number two, the trend toward automation and the replacement of jobs by robots is becoming real now, where hundreds of thousands of white-collar jobs in the legal profession, journalists, and then in the blue-collar jobs by truck drivers and taxi drivers. These jobs are very quickly going to be completely taken over by robots. That's an enormously deflationary pressure to the economy, taking away the impetus to raise rates. And if rates are going to continue to be at 0%, then why should these markets, the multiples can expand? If you can borrow money for nothing, and there's why should we even look at these multiples, Wolf?
Yeah, well, we have seen substantial inflation in economies that are in a deep recession. That includes Brazil. And Brazil has been in a terrible recession for a couple of years now, and they've had double-digit inflation until last year, and the central bank has cracked down on it now, raising interest rates at one point up to 14%. Its policy rate now, it's down to 13%. So a lack of demand doesn't mean that there will be deflation, or that in the consumer price index, there may very well be deflation in asset prices. But in terms of the consumer price index, there may be other factors involved. And certainly in Brazil, there were a lot of factors involved why they had this surge of inflation at the same time that the economy was spiraling south. And this is happening in a number of other economies. So we could very well face a period where we have inflation, and it's ticking up right now, and it associated with lackluster demand. That could very well be. And when you have a currency that devalues and you have lots of inflation, it throws a whole economic model overboard. Your consumers are not making any more money, so inflation will take the purchasing power away, and then you have even more slack demand. At the same time, you could, like in Brazil, you could continue with a surging inflation. So I don't know that we know for sure in terms of where inflation will go. I mean, right now it's going up. We've seen that. Right now inflation is heading north, and the Fed is reacting to it. And in other countries it's heading north too. In Europe and Japan, and we've all seen inflation tick up there, even though the central banks have not reacted to it.
Right. Well, in the case of Brazil and all these other countries, of course, you have a situation where capital is fleeing these countries, and they end up going into U.S. Treasury bond market, which is supporting keeping rates low again. So the U.S. is inheriting these problems from abroad, and rates are cheap. And until Yellen or whoever's running the Fed decides to raise interest rates, I don't see any contraction in these multiples. Let me. And we only have about 30 seconds left. So. In your work, I mean, maybe we'll carry this over to a second segment, but in the remaining 30 seconds or so, where should we look for there's smoke right now that we're going to see the flame that's going to blow this thing up? In 2008, it was the subprime. In the year 2000, it was the dot-com. In 1987, it was program trading. Where should we focus our attention where there's a bit of a brush fire that will, in fact, be the sore spot to get this avalanche of sell orders kicking in, Wolf? What do you think?
Yeah, I really think this time around it's different. We're looking at a different equation because of the central bank monetary policies. So a lot of these things that we would think were fires, they're just smoldering, and they're kept smoldering, but they're not bursting into fires. I think the multiple expansion stock market is a big risk. I also think the U.S. housing market is a big risk. The Fed is on track to raise rates. I mean, even a 1 percentage point increase in mortgage rates at these current home prices can, take a sledgehammer to the housing market. We've already seen a huge influx of investors into that market rather than first-time buyers. So it's a very leveraged market. So we can see some weakness there. Auto sales, I think.
All right, Wolf, we're going to cut it off there, carry it over to another segment. Thanks for being on the Keiser Report.
Okay, thank you.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report. With me, Max Keiser and Stacey Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, Wolf Richter of wolfstreet.com. If you want to reach us on Twitter, it's Keiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.